profile name.
Hey everyone, the live stream is up and the slides are up. There shouldn't be any feedback, so we should be ready to start. Okay, so we can see that there are folks joining.
Yeah. Hey, Mike Mitrowski. I think your profile you can hear is okay?
Yep, I can hear.
Okay. I think your profile name shows different. You show up as Mike, sorry, Murali. So either we had to change your name or we had to change Murali's name to Mike.
Yeah, let me try to, maybe I'll rejoin. Let's see.
No, I think it may be okay. I mean,
As you're using my link, so maybe you just need to update your profile. So that should be good.
Okay, everyone, we're going to give everybody just a few more minutes to join and then we'll get started.
Is my audio okay? You can hear it well?
Yes.
I can hear yours too. Becky, since we went live, I think your audio a little bit, or maybe you're further away from the mic.
Okay, thank you. I will mute myself shortly, so.
Thank you, Becky. We'll get started. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us and welcome to the webinar today. I'm really excited doing this webinar with the experts here, and I'll introduce them in a few minutes. So we're going to talk about managing data security, data sharing, and entitlements in financial markets. My name is Ganesh Kirti. I'll be the moderator for this webinar today. So we have an exceptional panel of experts here who will be sharing their insights on how financial companies and financial services effectively managing the landscape of evolving data security, compliance, and including the AI topic. So just for the brief overview of what we're going to do today is, as in the slide says, we're going to talk about a few important topics. As I said, financial landscape is evolving rapidly, and with it comes magnitude of challenges and opportunities as well. So we'll dwell into the critical aspects of data sharing, which is very, very common the way we see it, and data security, and also the most important entitlements, which is really important for not exposing the data and data leakages. So we'll also be covering some of the regulations, especially for the global organizations that are operating globally, compliances and regulations like GDPR. EU recently introduced DORA for operations and reliability and in the financials verticals. We'll talk about that. And of course, we had to talk about AI. We're going to talk about AI and then how it affects various projects and various adoption of AI in the financial services. So we got a great topics. I'm really excited. So before we get into this, let me introduce panelists here. I'll start with Gurmeet. Gurmeet, if you can just introduce yourself, and then we'll go in that order.
Yep. Yeah, hi. Hi, thank you, Ganesh. Hello, everyone. My name is Gurmeet Singh. I'm a data security lead at Jefferies, and I'm excited to be a part of this discussion today and looking forward to share with you my experience and some of the trick that we use. All good. Thank you.
Thank you, Gurmeet. Murli?
Yeah, good morning, everyone. I'm Murali Sesham. I'm Chief Technology and Data Officer at Credit Union One. We are a credit union, community charter credit union based out of Michigan. And we've been on the Snowflake journey for the past 2 years now. And then I could share what are the things, the challenges we faced, and how we brought our teams into a situation where we are comfortable leveraging these technologies.
Thank you, Murli. Hey, Mike, can you please?
And I'm Mike Mitrowski. I'm Security Field CTO at Snowflake, covering financial services. So generally work with all of our Snowflake customers on private networking, identity, data governance, cryptography, SIM integrations, fine-grained entitlement management, and also secure data sharing models. And also, a really common use case now is data governance around and the security models around our Gen AI and machine learning capabilities today.
Thank you. Just for everyone, just under Mike Mitrowski, who just introduced himself, the name shows up as Murli. It's just, to fix that, but please assume that he is real Mike and he's Mike. So, just ignore the name title for there. No. No, thank you. And then just for myself, I'm a CEO founder at TrustLogix, and we've been doing data security, and all the panelists here, we've been working closely with them for many years, and including the Snowflake. We are a partner of Snowflake. We work with Mike and field CTO team, and product managers and some of the other experts within the Snowflake. Really all about working closely with financial companies here. As a TrustLogix, we work financials and as well as other verticals such as healthcare. But for our discussion today, we're going to focus on financials, and we've been working closely with Mike's team and Snowflake side. As you can see, we have investment bank, Jefferies, and we have credit union. We'll have a very, very good, insights in here. From the audience perspective, please do, put in questions. We want to make it as much engaging as possible. We'll take the questions as they come in, introduce them in as part of the discussion. So please do, put in the questions as we get in here. So with that said, let me kick it off. The key topic is, the evolving topic is really on the elephant of the room, which is the data compliance, and then the risks associated within the financial markets. So, the regulatory complex landscape is becoming complicated. With GDPR, especially the globally operating companies already know about it. And then with the data, the way we see is back in the days, I've been doing security for a long time. Back in the days, 10, 12 years ago, the way the data is used is totally different compared to how the data is used today. Back in those days, it's just the SQL queries, that was it. You just run the SQL queries, you get access to data. But today, there's so many ways data is being used, not just the SQL queries, but Spark SQL, ETL workflows, there's a Python and there's APIs. And companies like Snowflake and AWS, they're making it so easy to consume data, by writing applications. So there are so many ways data is getting used. And data sprawl, which is really data has to be available wherever it's required, whether it's a data lakes, data warehouses, analytics. Now with AI now increasingly getting adopted in the LLMs, training going into the LLM models, LLM applications getting deployed, Gen AI applications. So the data sprawl is given. And in some cases, we also see that data sprawling across multiple data clouds. So there is a data sprawl given, multi-cloud is given. And then also many companies are now moving into the cloud first strategy. There used to be a time where companies used to be, say, cloud preferred. Companies now, we're also seeing more and more cloud first companies. So that means they're moving workloads into the cloud. So with that, the data sprawl, data, moving across different environments, regulations like GDPR, and then we've got DORA coming in, in the Europe, especially from operations perspective, it's becoming very, very challenging. So, with that background, I want to start, bringing in experts here. Paul, I'll start with, maybe Murli from you, right, on the credit union side. Can you talk about, how are you guys, adopting, right, these compliances, regulations within your domain? And what strategies, right, are you looking at using, for example, right? I'll just open it up and then we'll start there.
Right. Thanks, Ganesh. Again, thanks, Ganesh. Sorry. So, as with any financial institutions, you have regulatory body, and then in credit unions we have NCUA. We have regulations coming from overall the review that comes in the audits, and then we have our internal audit. So we want to ensure that the biggest challenge is there's a volume of regulations that we need to make sure that we are adhering to as we are putting our data in the cloud. There's a board most of the time, like our credit union boards are very conservative, So they have concerns on, okay, what's happening with the data, member data going into cloud? How do we make sure it is secure? And then you got to balance that with the rapid advancement in technologies, where we need to use these technologies like Snowflake to be able to achieve some of our strategic goals, right? So to ensure that we are balancing those things with the regulatory requirements, you have leveraging of technology, and then this data privacy and cybersecurity, which is ever present. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when we're going to have some sort of breach, but how do we put ourselves ahead in the game? So the key areas where we evaluated with the journey is to first make sure there is a synergy between the data team and the security team. And we educate, we train both teams to make sure there's a understanding of, okay, how we make sure the security first mindset. Before we put anything in that, before we did put any data into our Snowflake environments, we ensure that it is everybody has a security first mindset and go with the least privilege settings. And then it's having a separate environments for dev and prod and setting those policies and procedures helped us into a form where we are more comfortable as an organization. And then this is where bringing tools like ability to understand like the trust logics we partnered to help get to know what all the egress happening with the data is coming, data is going out, who are the users who are using, not using, what is the data masking policies that help us. When the regulators come, we have this audit log. We can show it to them, hey, this is what we have, this is how we're tracking who is accessing the system and what other systems are accessing, and we are able to keep track of it. So it's always an ever-growing challenge. But the key takeaways is ensure that you leverage these tools, make sure you build out a security first mindset, and build a very good synergy between infrastructure, data, and security teams.
Okay. Well, thank you. Let me also from the investment bank side, Gurmeet, grab a bit of your, insights as well. What are the challenges that you see, meeting these compliance regulations, right? Within your investment, banking side. It'll be great to hear your what are you looking to address, right? Or what are you guys seeing the challenges from meeting these regulation compliance?
Absolutely. I mean, compliance is something that we at Jefferies take it very seriously and try to be, as soon as the new requirement, new regulatory comes out, we'll try to be compliant as quickly as possible, right? And it's also assure that give confidence to the customers that company is doing everything to protect the data and privacy, right? Of course, the challenges, comes with it, an increased overhead cost, and operation complexity. And I can assure you, it's not just limited to the financial firm. The challenge is what you see here. You mentioned earlier, there are regulatory across the pond, DORA and GDPR, for example, right? The challenge is to create a policy that fits all. GDPR, where it focuses on like a privacy and rights and, data protection, where DORA emphasized more on the operation resilience, right? As you navigated through this complex requirement, enhancing the data security and managing the third-party risk, ensuring and make sure that it's implemented across the board. I can only think of we come out with an established unified strategy that one solution fits all, or either we adopt the technologies that's already have this can meet the demand of the regulatory. We use some of the technologies available today, and TrustLogic is one of them that we looked at. So that's the challenge, is to create one strategy that establishes a unified strategy that can cover both requirement from different part of the world.
Awesome. So, look, Mike, I want to bring you in as well. I know you work with large financial companies, across the globe, from Snowflake perspective. I'm sure you're giving guidance to, your clients, right? And then also there is a question from the audience that says like auditing reporting seems to be a big part of the, the overall strategy of, compliance, right? To ensuring the compliance. That totally makes sense. That's like one of the big parts. So, Mike, any insights here, like how you are helping out your clients?
Yeah, definitely. So a lot of times when planning to meet regulatory and compliance regulations, whether it's GDPR and things like right to be forgotten, Snowflake, we have a number of features on the truck of where we can enforce, for instance, region-based sovereignty. We can obviously, cryptographic provenance, things like that as well. So where customers always have key sovereignty around the, positive control of their encryption keys to maintain compliance over their cryptographic operations, but also data sovereignty where data will remain within a specific cloud service provider region. And then down at the data level, right? The ability is to enforce things like format preserving encryption or even differential privacy to say anonymize, but also use a semantic guarantee of privacy through something like differential privacy versus weaker forms of anonymization like a k-anonymization algorithm. In addition, as mentioned, right, so kind of aligning to those control mappings. It could be NIST controls, so whether it's 853, 800-171, HIPAA, HITRUST, PCI DSS. Really being able to measure those controls. One of the things that we do really well on the Snowflake side is capture 365 days of audit logs natively within your customer Snowflake tenant. So with that, we have a repo, Snow Sentry. So this provides a lot of pre-built queries where customers can measure for any sort of security anomaly detection, whether they're trying to measure against industry controls, but also being able to do any sort of anomaly detection against things like the MITRE ATT&CK framework. So it's a balance between audit, non-repudiation, but also being able to prove controls assurance, but also being able to do anomaly detection for more active, bad actors that are in the wild today.
Yeah, so I think it's a great, like, not just the audit compliance reporting, but also, proactively looking at the activities and then ensuring that there's no anomalous activity, it's happening in the environment. So that totally makes sense. Well, just, what we also see, right, from the nostalgic side, I think I'm also looking at the questions from audience here. Is a unified strategy, as Gurmeet talked about, it's completely, it makes sense, having, strategy where you're continuously looking at activities and auditing and monitoring it, and then taking a proactive approach, on the reporting as well as, not just the reporting, but also take action on cleaning it. When you see some deviations, when you see some excessive grants, excessive permissions, excessive roles, ineffective policies, right? It's very important that from the compliance perspective, there's no data leakage happening. And also there is no overly granted, permissions where people are not supposed to have access, but they have access to the data. So it's very important that from compliance is not just a GDPR, DORA, but also, the SOC 2 and Sarbanes-Oxley within financials, it's very important that, there is a least privileges maintained all the time, and that can be achieved by constantly looking at excessive access and ineffective roles and policies. So that's, with that said, I want to get to the second topic, which is another a critical pillar, the way we see it, of data security in the financial institutions, which is really the entitlements and access controls. So it's very important that safeguarding, right, the sensitive information in these financial data sets requires a granular access to data. It's just not enough that just have database protection, a coarse-grained access of tabular, right? There's a business rules, there is the entitlements that people, the employees and consultants and partners, customers, right? They, based on their entitlement, they can only get access to what they're allowed to access, and it's very, very important. And I want to just spend a few minutes on that. And there is also, we see it, when it comes to implementing access controls and entitlements, there is a collaboration that is required between the data teams and security teams, right? Security teams typically have, the policies and regulations. They want to make sure that they're implementing. And then there is a data teams, data owners typically get involved in implementing access controls. And there is a constant collaboration. Sometimes lack of tools also creates the friction between these two teams, and they start trusting, or they start, going in a siloed fashion in some cases, which is really a bad thing for companies. So, and again, I'll take the same style approach here, just go through each of you, right? Gurmeet, this time, from your perspective, right? If you can just like give some light here, right? On the entitlement and access controls, how you see is enforced, within your company.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, as a data security expert, right, my best practice is like embrace the zero trust policy. There's no doubt. Like, prioritize the least privileged principle as much as possible. But with time, we've seen this, that grow into something different. Like a strong authentication, enforcing a user's access right, the separate duty, segmentation of the environment, and constantly monitoring, like you mentioned earlier, like, that for suspicious activities, prompting and addressing, and then action, escalation, stuff like that. And then in the old days, we had a lot of role-based, RBAC system that been built, but with time, it becomes unmanageable. A lot of companies, roles are overlapping each other. The permissions are created. So with time, this become unmanageable. So you got to stop the bleed. The attribute ABAC that was in attribute-based access control, that's widely being used and introduced and being implemented today, and that's more controllable. And basically, you stop the bleed by just any new role, any new access control going forward. We're going to use the ABAC, and then we're going to go back and rectify if we see anything that was was in the role-based RBAC in the past. So that's my approach would be.
It's very interesting. So you're saying, RBAC is given, RBAC has been there for ages, right? It's built into, every database I know of, and, you had to use it, it's proven technology. But over the time, you're saying, the roles can become, unmanageable because, teams keep creating roles and without thinking through, role hierarchies, and that could end up becoming a challenge. And one way to look at you're saying is you could potentially look at use case by use case and then apply attribute-based access control, which is a complementary extension of RBAC, and that could reduce the number of roles required, effectively manage still access controls. Okay. So Murli, from your perspective, right? Like specifically, like what challenges, right? If you have inadequate access controls, let's say, right?
Mm-hmm.
What risks do you see? Maybe let's take it from that angle, right? What's the impact? What's the consequence if you don't have adequate access controls?
Yeah, thanks, Ganesh. So, from Gurmeet's point, I think the zero trust is key. I think how do you go by is very different from an organization. Like we are not a large shop; we are a smaller shop, but we do want to have this tighter access controls. So that way, like we're only giving controls. Like we don't want everybody to be account admins. We don't want like those kind of a. So the way the challenges I see is how do we make sure that we can do certain things that only account admin can do, because some of our developers wear multiple hats, but at the same time we don't want to keep that access levels open to all and all the time. So we've instituted certain policies on our side by, first of all, having the scheme integration between our AD and the Snowflake with SSO. And we are still sticking with the role-based access. And that is challenging, but we did define the roles that are minimally required for developers and to use those as a policies. And then we have alerts set up whenever there is an admin role is activated. We get alert sent to the security team. So, and then there's we need to set up a notification. Okay, why did we use this account admin? The reason it is with this day and age where it's very the cybersecurity, even the vulnerabilities can be exploited, if you leave someone with higher access all the time, if an account gets compromised for whatever reasons, then the entire tenant is at risk. That's the main reason why we don't want leave everyone with the full level access. We want to keep it minimally required, only use it for the time being, and then leverage multi-factor authentication, leverage zero trust strategies. But for us, proactive monitoring, collaborating with the security team, and then using these higher roles only when needed with the policy guideline of defining why we use that role is how we are managing these things, these security practices. But we are still staying with the role-based. We need to explore the attribute, but for our organization, role-based access is serving its purpose.
Okay, but you still have some type of you keeping an eye on the blind spots, right? Potential blind spots you may have with
Right.
the ineffective roles, and people intently by intent or by accident or maliciously, right? If they grant a powerful admin roles to some users, you will get alerted immediately. And then
Yes.
you will make sure that there's no data leakage, there is no inappropriate misuse of data is happening within the company. So you do have some type of checks and balances in place, while giving access to people through the roles.
That's correct. The moment we identified all high privilege roles, the moment somebody assigns themselves or assigns that to someone, an alert is sent to security team. And also we've enabled CIS scanners within Snowflake. We like the trust center that enabled in Snowflake. That's really helpful. And that also sends out alerts. And then so all the tools that we put in place, we get immediate alert. Somebody assumes a higher security tool, we get an alert. And if we don't see something happening right away as a message coming into our change log, okay, I'm assuming this, then our security team goes, hey, why did you use this? So we're trying to make sure that that proactive culture, as I said, it's a security mindset. It took a little longer for us to get everybody into the security mindset. And these tools are helping us stay on check.
Great. I think, I wish every company that we talk to, falls into that category of, the way you are doing, really as a chief data officer. So it looks like you're taking a more proactive partner very well with your security counterparts to take that from very early on. So which is really great. And unfortunately, we see a lot of times with companies we work with, they think that they have a good security, but when we start looking into their overall security posture, 50 to 60% of the time they don't have proper policies. Their data is already exposed, so they don't even know. So it's really, really important that what you're saying is really taken as a kind of security active role, proactive approach. So hey, look, Mike, let's get into the data sharing, which is another critical part of it. But before we get there, there's one common question that keeps on coming. Mike, is I know Snowflake perspective, I mean, we want to keep it more, I know we have audience that use Snowflake, they use Databricks, they use AWS, it's a multi-cloud story. But also there are companies like Okta's and Ping Federation, there's a single sign-on, there is an access, management system, right? Pretty much every company has to have it or have it. And if they don't have it already, they will have it. Now, the groups and users and roles come from that Active Directory and like systems from the single sign-on in identity systems. But there is a data security that sits in the, on these data platforms, right? There are the roles and access permissions, they still need to be maintained. Mike, can you just kind of explain to audience here, right? While we still need these two are complementary, right? There's sometimes confusion happens like, hey, look, I already have Okta, why do I need data security, right? Could you please, give a little bit of a light on that?
Yeah, absolutely. And Gurmeet and Murali really knocked it out of the park on kind of the front end of this question. So really, a lot of customers, they focus on the perimeter security first, which today is a flavor of modern authentication, whether that's federated via SAML, different OAuth flows. So we recommend all the OAuth 2.1 grant types, so the authorization code flow plus PXE for human users, device code flows, or the client credential flow, common for machine-to-machine communication, or public-private key pair with a private key retrieved from a secrets management solution. Once authenticated to the Snowflake account, we generally see a lot of our customers try to centralize identity management through our SCIM API. So if you're using Entra ID or if you're using Okta, passing that JSON web token to Snowflake SCIM API to create your users, also map your groups to roles on the Snowflake side. That does kind of the initial provisioning. Now the entitlements, as mentioned before, have to be provisioned on the Snowflake side today. There are standards like IPSI that's kind of emerging within the OpenID Connect Foundation of where pushing more and more companies to use really centralize all of their identity management through the protocols like SCIM, but doing all the entitlement management directly on the Snowflake side. So, as Morali and as Gurmat mentioned, right, always enforcing the principle of least privilege that only the entitlements are provisioned to the appropriate roles are required of that user's job function. And then, as mentioned, right, it sounds like both organizations are doing a terrific job of staying really vigilant on really controlling of anytime anybody's ever built out, with Snowflake, right, where you have discretionary access control based on object ownership or role-based access control, it's always great when you start on day one. Entitlement sprawl is always a real issue for a lot of customers and being able to monitoring drift of entitlements, how they're enforcing least privilege, right? Are we identifying grants that are not being used that we could remove from a role permission, things like that? Those are all things where we see a lot of the queries in the repo, a lot of the partner tools aforementioned, being able to kind of measure that entitlement sprawl so customers can constantly measure and revoke entitlements, ensuring that they're really maintaining that principle of least privilege at scale.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. I think I'll just add like a few more things there as well, right? As all of you said, you know, the key complementary with identity systems like Oktas and tokens, like Mike is saying, right, is important authentication. You want to make sure that your MFA, your authentication users are the right users. They are able to come in and then access. But also once you get into that data, when you're running the queries, when you're running, based on the user who is running what type of queries, what type of data access, right? There's entitlements. That entitlements have to be, at the more fine-grained level. They may need to be protecting the column level, data. Sometimes they may need to protecting the, row level filters. Only the subset of data will be allowed access. So all that fine-grained level data protection still need to be enforced within the Snowflake or Databricks or AWS environments. And that is not done by the Okta. So the Okta will help you, kind of authentication and entry into the Snowflake system in this case. But then there has to be some data permissions enforcement happens. So that's kind of difference there. And you need both these technologies working together to ensure that the data is comprehensively protected and then given access to the right people. So with that said, I've got two more topics. So I'm just going to move a little bit faster. But also, and I really like the questions coming in. Please do, keep pushing in questions. Try to cover as much as possible. On the data sharing side, it's very important in the world where we live in. The data sharing is becoming foundational for many companies in healthcare, financials, sharing data internally, sharing data with partners. There's a lot of marketplaces we are seeing, where data is made available to their consumers from the providers, data providers. At the the core of it is that data also has to be protected. There's a lot of sensitive information that is being shared based on the case by case. Just to avoid compliance and security misuse and breaches, right? So the data has to be protected. So we talked about access control. So maybe Mike, you could just kind of like throw in a little bit of, but when it comes to data sharing, right? One or two things what one should make sure that they follow the guidelines there.
Yeah, as far as access control, it's obviously like anything else. It starts with role-based access control, and then obviously the entitlements provided to that role. And like anything else, the way I always put it, the three legs of the stool is the permissions of the role are always going to be the most important piece within Snowflake. And then the underlying policies that you craft. So if you mentioned if you want to, filter or view specific row level security to be applied, or also different flavors of column level security as well. So with column level security, we can use format preserving encryption. We can use non-deterministic encryption. We can bake in with an external tokenization service. We could use different flavors of dynamic data masking, which will mask the data with an underlying regex model, whether we want to fully or partially mask. Customers obviously can, dictate with the entitlements of which data access. So, for instance, which databases, schemas, and tables that role has access to. We can also, rather than using discretionary access control and just role-based access control, we can use managed access schemas, where the schema owner can then also delegate permissions of who has access to the underlying schema for an additional level of access control. So it's really those three layers of the stool of the permissions of the role, with obviously the role binding dictated by the entitlements, the underlying policies crafted, so whether it's at row or column level, and then really we use obviously things like tags for enforcement, but also to track lineage and also auditing within the Snowflake platform as well.
Yeah, so perfect. So I think there's like a multi-layer you're talking about. One is the roles and access controls is important, and then also case by case, masking might be relevant. If you're sharing data that you don't want to share some specific data sets, can mask it. And then also there is the foundational things like encryption, and then using the right SSL, TLS like securities if the data replication is happening across especially the globally operating companies where the data sharing is happening across regions. You want to make sure that the private links are used, and proper security is enforced at the network level as well. So it's a combination of things at the data level, at the network level, and at the user level. So it absolutely makes sense. Any comments, Gurmita or Murli? Are you guys looking at using sharing within your companies?
Yep.
Any thoughts there?
Yeah, from my perspective, I think the best way to tackle this is probably a combination of technical solution, clear policy, employee training, and third-party management practice. All these things you got to prioritize, like Mike said, prioritizing on the data security, compliance, and accountability to minimize the risk, right? Data, protecting the crown jewel, access control to the granular level where possible, wherever it is, avoid data silo, adopting, and you can do that by adopting the integrated, in a data management platform, or just have a set up the standardized rule, avoid human error, because at the end of the day, we'll quickly want to return around stuff, want to make sure that we do it right, training. And at the end, I would say we can monitoring. You can't have enough monitoring just to make sure that things are done right, and track your data users and stuff like that. That would be my approach. Yeah.
Yeah, I think Mike and Gurmit covered most of it. So it's not many things to add, but it is absolutely necessary to share data, right? We work in a environment where we have a lot of vendors where we need to, so having a frame policies in place, fine-grained access controls defined as to what exports are going to, what sharing happening to which vendor, and then having logs and monitoring and to see any anomalies, and then having a policies in place in it before we open that new share, reviewing it. Are we sending only what is required? Are we encrypting, putting the right encryption need, and then are we not putting any masks? Going through the checklist, again, training and partnership with the data and between beta and security team to making sure that that is enabled. That's what we're doing. It is very key because we cannot stop sharing, but we have to share as securely as possible and have a full level of monitoring, because we cannot rely on that. Okay, now that we have some security policies in place, or everything is good, because some things could change. New vulnerabilities could be identified. So it's monitoring and making sure that we are still in alignment with what we want to share is the key.
Super. So I think there are a couple of questions. I'll just take them and then just get into the next the important topic as well. Is yes, there was a couple of questions on the trust center, trust logics. Yes, there is integration. In fact, there is a work going on right now behind the scenes with Snowflake team on the trust logics integration with trust center. So that's available. That's going to be available through the native app. And then also on the data sharing perspective, we work with Snowflake in the Snowflake case. There is a monitoring ability that you could use trust logics to see what consumers are using what shared data, and then who is sharing with what, which data provider is sharing with which data consumer. So those various things you could absolutely keep an eye on using trust logics, security posture management tool. So having said that, I want to shift the gears a little bit now, delve into the transformative potential of AI. It's happening, it's real, it's moving fast, and I want to probably I could take some time on that as well. Especially in the financial services, a lot of potential, to help with the decision-making process, predictive analytics and a lot of advanced, the projects that are required from the AI perspective to use data. And this data we're talking about, business data, sensitive data, it's got a customer SLAs associated with it. There's a regulation associations with that. So given that, right? Given that companies have to, embrace AI, right? It's given, and everyone, including we at TrustLogix, right? We are building, AI powering our own system. So just like that, every company, including the businesses, right, have to do it. So probably one of you can pick it up and see, how are you guys thinking about it? What is, if at all anything, right? What is happening today within your
Sure, I
companies?
can share my thought on this. Definitely is a fun topic, AI. Well, this is a new frontier, right? I mean, we're living in the buzzword AI. Wherever you go, you find this. There's so many like a numerous product in the market today, and businesses are eagerly adopting them as we go. However, I see the challenge is lies in, let's take a step back and then thoroughly evaluate this product from the security perspective. How well do we truly understand the risks and vulnerabilities of everything we're introducing? From the data security aspect, I'm tracking the movement of data is at top of my mind. I want to know that what tool I'm introducing, how is it interactive with my data? Where is it going to? Where is it coming from? Who's using it? And after all, if you don't have those information, it's like you're walking blind in the jungle, and you can't protect what you don't know. So like one of the a cool feature of TrustLogix that we use to track the data, our data movement, it tells us, it provides us information that we already know and confirm it, that what we know is right, where our data is moving into, who is using it, how is it being integrated, stuff like that. And you mentioned the government framework on the AI. Yes, there's a lot of like a transparency, accountability, and the guideline that keep coming up. We got to adapt to it very quickly. Like I think a couple of days ago, there were some like a cyber trust mark that came out that all the IoT product has to be, it created confidence with the, if you follow the government framework as well, right? To the consumer who's using it, at least as we know, we're protecting them. And this is where I see the challenge is just to take a step back and evaluate this, that, how is it interacting with your data and how can you protect it? If you know it, then you can protect it. And I see the futures of everything is going to be on AI. I mean, as we are growing into this field, the security of the data security, like using the AI to monitoring, to heavily influence in the, the threat detection, proactive response, continuous monitoring, and take some action when needed. You already see this in the credit card company, like already using it. If your card is being exposed or used somewhere else out of norm, it will send you a block right away. This transaction cannot go through. So I will see more and more of this coming up in the near futures, like, as we learn more and know more about how we can use the AI, effectively. That's where I see, where the future is going to be.
Yeah, no,
If
I
it is
think,
not-
especially like, Murli, if you Mike can also comment, right? I think that in general, right, if you don't have a proper governance, let's say, right, look for this AI, right, what would be the consequence and what would be the risk associated, we see this all the time, right? Like data teams and business teams want to get things moving, they want to be productive, they want to, help businesses, obviously make money, right? In that spirit, they try to do things, they try to deploy technologies, they may not have think through, right? Security may not be their top of the mind design. So that really creates a blind spot. So having inadequate governance could really create problems for companies. How
Absolutely.
important is that? Yeah, if you can just comment
Oh.
on those things.
Governance is absolutely key. So, and then having so with the AI, even though it is feels like a new buzzword in the data field, it is not. We had different forms of AI for a long time. GPT is the newest incarnation. That's much more faster and efficient. And then we see vendors and tools reaching out, whether business users or technically, oh, we could do this, we could do this. So also in the financial industries, most of the time we do face a conservative board, conservative security teams, which is for a good reason. So the way we have created this whole path over the past 2 years, first thing is to set up a AI roadmap, AI policy guidelines. What can we use? What can we not use? Where can we use AI for? At this time, with our board, board is not comfortable using AI in decisioning any loan applications or any of those things. So that's for a good reason because the regulatory compliance, fairness, bias, all those things you got to take into account. For that to happen, you got to have a good governance in place that allows you to say, okay, is the solution that we want to bring in, is it strategically aligned with what our business wants to do, right? Is a business strategy and what is the AI solution bringing, is it in alignment or is it something out of alignment? That's one. So is it something, okay, we could do means should we do it? So having an opportunity radar as to, okay, what is this? Is it, how difficult is this for us to implement it? Do we have technical teams aligned, security teams aligned, business teams aligned to leverage what this AI tool is bringing us? But this is something that's going to come in and sit in and then could expose some vulnerabilities. So having that a working group of identifying this opportunity radar and measuring, okay, this new solution or new opportunity may potentially could be a game changer, but is it something that we could use it in an efficient way, right? And what are the models we're bringing in? The biggest challenge from my point is the data need to be, there should be data governance, data lineage, data explainability, so that if the garbage is going out, the garbage is going to come out. So we need to make sure our data is clean, data quality is measurable. There's a nice confidence with the business about how the data is maintained and managed. The data hygiene is extremely important. So once you have those things, then applying your data AI models will give you a lot higher confidence. So as much as businesses want to like sprint, we got to be pragmatic. We got to take it a little slow. We're not organizations with billions of dollars to waste. So we got to be really careful and use best, having a better policies in place, better practices, and again, a work group that is looking at each of these opportunities from a strategic mindset is very key for us to navigate these waters.
Got it. I think having the right policies, make sure that you have the policies within the company that everyone has a clarity and guidance, right? And then ensure that your data is clean and then put some governance on it just to make sure that there's a methodical way of streamlining adoption of the technology. So that sounds good and makes sense. And Becky is telling me to switch to questions. So let's also open up for audience. There's a lot of topics to cover, so just careful of the time as well here. Let's open up any questions from audience. You can take it. I'm also looking at the list here. There's definitely questions coming up here. There's a question on the data sharing side. So Mike, maybe I can just read it for you. There's a question about how can I monitor which consumer is accessing the data share. Yeah, so I think there's a question on like, if they are using Snowflake data share, how can they monitor? I believe, if you want to take it, Mike, take it. Yeah, there is already data and, anyone can implement it, but please go ahead and take that.
Yeah, and I'll pass a link to some of the underlying views of where you can monitor, for instance, some of the share history and kind of what's happening from an administrative perspective across the provider-consumer relationships within Snowflake's data sharing capabilities.
Okay, Yeah, and then also I think I can also feel free to follow up with us later on. I think our team can also do a demo to the folks. We worked with Snowflake team and there is a monitoring capability available in TrustLogix as well. All right, so and then there's a little bit of a question on the collaboration between security and the data teams. Maybe Gurmeet, you could talk. I know you guys have very rigorous process. How do you guys collaborate? Would tools like TrustLogix help you collaborate better? Between the data team and security teams, or in general, if you can put any
I mean,
guidance on that.
well, as a security team and data team, I mean, they're going to need data. They're going to come to you, and as long as you provide the guideline, this is how it's going to be. This is the most protected way, and then only you can allow the data to be to make sure that the data are clean, integrity of the data are there, and it's protected, especially the crown jewel environment, and all the policy that you created ahead of time, and everybody must, there's regardless of where it's coming from, it must go through the process. If it's something new, yes, we take a step back or evaluate, why do you need this? What is this for? And we constantly review this policy with the data team as well as the security team to make sure that we're not stopping business from growing. At the same time, we want to make sure that the environment is protected, to the T, basically, as deep as possible.
Yeah, I think it's very important that the siloed, the lack of tools, right? What happens is then data teams are owners of the data. They have responsibility, and then the security teams have accountability from keeping the data protected in the company. So they have both interest, to make sure that they do the right thing. But lack of tools sometimes creates that friction between them, and it delays and creates frustration for data teams. For data consumers, especially who need access to data. Having some collaboration between these two organizations would absolutely help improve the productivity for data consumers, and then also improve the security posture.
And, multiple version of data exist, and the dirty data get promoted and stuff like that. So if we go through the step-by-step guideline, and that eliminate all those things, otherwise it's going to be a real mess.
Yeah, so thank you, Gurmeet. I think we've got another 5 minutes here. So I want to start. I know we've covered good amount of ground. I mean, I can keep going, couple of hours here. There's so many topics here, but we've covered a lot of ground in navigating the data compliance to harnessing the power of AI in a secure fashion. I would like to give maybe an opportunity for you guys, for panelists, right? Any advice, any call to action, right, from your perspective for audience here. Mike, we'll start with you, and then just take a quick guidance from your perspective. You're on mute, Mike.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, as far as guidance, we've seen a lot of customers, right, adopt really defense in-depth architectures, right? So whether that's, modern auth, in a centralizing provisioning, obviously using the Ohio method, we're only handling things once from your identity provider, fine-grained entitlements, and kind of moving through a real holistic data governance strategy. One of the things that we've seen with the adoption of AI is reviewing a lot of technical security architecture, right? For instance, being a multi-tenant SaaS application of how customers, for instance, are leveraging Cortex functions, right? How we're limiting things like prompt injection vulnerabilities with things like Cortex Guard, functioning very similar to things like Llama Guard in the industry. Also, the multi-tenancy and the isolation within the inference server. But like anything else, tracing those prompt requests, what's intellectual property and what isn't. Really big data governance questions where it's a combination of really technical security professionals, legal professionals, and then obviously business leaders kind of having a holistic steer code to get to the best outcome that Morale and Gurmeet mentioned previously. So those are kind of some of the core pieces of guidance of, I think, like anything else, there's always good proactive security architecture reviews, but that constant vigilance that the team mentioned and the other panelists mentioned really drives the best outcome over time, where it's like anything else in security, active monitoring, detection, and remediation, like anything else, that good hygiene just can't be replaced by any other process.
Great, good guidance, Mike. Murli, from your
Yeah.
perspective.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Actually, we covered really well topics, but I think the three key points in the guidance I would say is make sure this is going to take time, especially if the culture need to be built. So you have to accommodate the amount of time that need to go through to make sure there's a nice collaboration between data security infrastructure teams, because each of these teams have their own roles and responsibilities for building that collaboration, being very proactive, building up that upskilling teams is extremely important as you go through these modern implementations, and engaging vendors and reaching out to tools and bringing tools, because not everything should be homegrown, because there's so much of technology available. So evaluating those tools, injecting those tools in a appropriate time to speed up the process. So, and then being vigilant, and having those policies and monitoring and being vigilant that this is an ever changing landscape, and we cannot escape from that fact. So we have to be vigilant in this one. Those are the three things I would watch out for.
Thank you, Gurmeet. Final
No,
advice from your
and I
perspective.
agree with both Mike and Murali. I think there's pretty much we're going to the same part, that create a governance that both business and security team agreed on, and follow that process, like enforce it, review them on a regular basis, because technology change, things change. Training and monitoring, I can't emphasize that enough. Because monitoring is that things are done accordingly, the way you want it to be done, and auditing, meeting all the compliance. So all this thing, mentioned earlier with Murali and Mike, I agree with this. This is where create a governance, enforce it, and review it regularly. That's what it is.
Thank you, Gurmeet. And I want to thank, the panelists for valuable insights. Look, from my perspective, from Prasad's perspective, right? The way we see it is, data security, compliance, and governance is not a static concept, but it's an ongoing journey. The key is to remain proactive. That's really what one has to do it, and then proactive, informed, and adapt, right? Adapt to ensure your institutions or your companies are seizing the opportunities while mitigating the risks in this ever evolving, changing, technologies and the new solutions, right? So with that said, I want to thank again, Gurmeet, Murali, and Mike, for your time. I know it's busy schedules for you guys. I really appreciate that. Thank you so much again. With that,
Thank you.
we'll wrap up the webinar. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.